Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And today is going to be a little bit different because there was a major, and I'm talking about a major Xbox leak that stemmed from the internal FTC versus Microsoft documents. A lot of redacted information was accidentally made public, and I mean, we're talking about the biggest, and I do mean that quite literally, the biggest Xbox leak in history. We're talking about future hardware plans. We're talking about Bethesda's roadmap, which includes several unannounced games, internal acquisition discussions, which includes apparently acquiring Nintendo. That was discussed a lot today, and there is just so much more to go over here. So we're going to cover all of that today and go over each individual topic one by one. It's just a lot to cover, so I just dedicated the entire video to this, and some of this is highly interesting. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned. Just kind of keep in mind, though, as we go forward, that internal plans like this can change over time, and some of this information might be a little outdated. I've also seen a lot of information get taken out of context, and that's actually how I want to start this video. There's a lot of outlets right now, a lot of discussion reporting that Xbox was targeting a Nintendo acquisition back in 2020, and this is actually very misleading. Phil Spencer never actually said that they were targeting Nintendo. Instead, what's happening here is that Phil Spencer was asked in an email about why they weren't pursuing a Nintendo acquisition, in which he basically explains why that's just not possible right now. Now, I'm not going to share his email on here, but he basically said Nintendo is a highly successful company that's sitting on a mountain of cash, which is absolutely true. As we all know, the Nintendo Switch has been crazy successful. It's been breaking records all generation long, and it's already the third best-selling console ever made. They've also been absolutely killing it in terms of their first-party software sold this generation. They have so many games that has sold more than 20 million units, some of which have sold above 30 million, and I think Mario Kart's like, what, near 50 million units sold? It's absolutely crazy. But nonetheless, Nintendo is not in the position to be acquired by anybody. And that's basically what Phil Spencer said in his email. He did, however, mention future possibilities if they ever rise, but that's pretty much the extent of it. In other words, this is not going to happen in the foreseeable future. Sure, Xbox and Microsoft would probably like to have Nintendo because, I mean, we're talking about Nintendo. Everybody wants to have Nintendo, but it's just not going to happen in the foreseeable future. In fact, I don't even think that this is worth speculating over because Nintendo likely will be highly successful with their next console as well. Nintendo will remain on their own with the Switch and the Switch successor. For that matter, if the Switch successor is highly successful, well, then they'll be on their own for their next generation as well. So we're talking another 10, 20 years of Nintendo being on their own. So again, this isn't even worth speculating over. However, there was a very interesting partnership that Xbox was interested in, and that was none other than Sega. Sega did garner some acquisition interest from Microsoft, as we discovered in the FTC trial, but if you remember a few years ago, at the time there were some rumors that Xbox was going to acquire Sega and release an Xbox Series console in Japan in partnership with Sega. Basically, the rumor claimed that they were going to make a Sega Series X, which would boost the brand recognition in Japan, where Xbox has historically struggled. In that context, the partnership does actually make perfect sense for both. Sega would be back in the console-making business once again, the Sega Dreamcast 2, if you will. I would love to see that happen. And Xbox, they would be in a better position themselves over in Japan. Well, here's the thing, because according to some internal emails, both Phil Spencer and actually Sega as well apparently love this idea. Now, hold on, as I said at the beginning of the video, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were planning to make this happen. Don't take this out of context, but they did, at the very least, like this idea. If anything else, if Xbox does ever acquire Sega, and that's a big if, but if they do, a Sega Xbox console in Japan would then be a realistic outcome based on the conversations had here. Something that could still happen in the near future, though, is that Phil Spencer did also mention making Sega-themed console wraps, which could include some of their various IP, and this could actually still potentially happen. As we now know, they just announced custom Xbox Series X wraps here recently, which includes a Starfield edition. And hey, with Sega and Xbox having a tight relationship, as we're kind of seeing with these emails, some Sega-themed wraps could theoretically actually happen. Speaking of acquisitions, though, amidst all of the talk about Nintendo and Sega, the publisher Xbox went and actually acquired was ultimately Bethesda, which is turning out to be a winning combo for them. They've had a great year together in 2023 with games like Hi-Fi Rush, Starfield. They also dropped Ghostwire Tokyo on Xbox, and of course, they released Quake 2 Enhanced. They've had a very, very good year together. But check this out. Bethesda's roadmap before the acquisition was completed has found its way online. Now, keep in mind that this roadmap is several years old, which means that plans may have since changed. Some of these games may have been canceled, or they could have been turned into completely something else. So don't take this roadmap as absolute confirmation. That is something that I've continued to repeat through this video, but it is important to kind of keep in mind, especially here. But there was several unannounced games discovered on this roadmap, which includes Oblivion Remastered, Fallout 3 Remastered, Doom Year Zero, Dishonored 3, Ghostwire Tokyo 2, and then a licensed IP that's not Indiana Jones. Now, there's been some rumors of a Mandalorian game over at Bethesda. I know a lot of people want that to happen, so maybe the two are actually linked here. But either which way, I mean, this is a pretty exciting lineup of unannounced games. Now, there are also some other unannounced projects as well under code names, but we really have no idea what those are. But what I will say here is that this is a huge lineup that greatly benefits Xbox Game Pass. I know I'm personally a huge fan of Oblivion. I love that game growing up on the Xbox 360, and to see it might be making a comeback is pretty exciting stuff. Doom Year Zero, that's another one here that I'm kind of interested in. What exactly is this game? Will it be the third game in the excellent rebooted trilogy, or is this something else? I want to hear from you Doom fans out there, so let me know what you all think this Doom Year Zero is. Now, I do also know there's a lot of fans for the Dishonored franchise, and it's pretty cool to see it show up here in some capacity as well. The first two games was highly reviewed, as was Deathloop, which is a part of the same universe. So Arcane making another Dishonored game, I'm sure will make a lot of fans happy, but let me know which game here you're most excited about, of course, if it actually comes to fruition. Okay, so we've talked about the various partnerships and acquisitions. We've talked a little bit about Bethesda's roadmap, but I think some of the most interesting leaks today came from the hardware side of things, and that starts off with two things that could happen within the next 12 months. A brand new controller and a new Xbox Series X console. Both leaked out online with very specific details given. We'll first start off with the Xbox Series. I'm going to call it a C for cylinder, but the Xbox Series C is being described as an Xbox Series X refresh. At first, you might think that that might mean that it's an Xbox Series X Pro, but that's actually not the case here. I'll go ahead and include a picture on screen of its concept design, but as you can see, it's a cylinder-designed digital-only console, and here's some of its highlights. According to them, it's planned to launch in 2024 for $499. It has 2 terabytes of storage. It's a digital-only console. It has Wi-Fi 6E support, Bluetooth 5.2, a 6nm die to improve efficiency, 15% less power supply power, and it will come with a new immersive controller, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Now, again, keep in mind that this is an early concept, so some things could still change, but it seems like one of the main focuses for this console is it being digital only. It's the digital only Xbox Series X that's been often speculated among fans. Honestly, I'm a little surprised that it's taken them so long to give fans this option, but that's kind of the thing here. This is not just a digital-only option either. They are explaining this as a quote-unquote refresh, and there are various other improvements. Still, though, this doesn't appear to be an Xbox Series X Pro, if you will. Now, maybe there will be some other improvements that's not listed here, but my expectations based on this specific leak is that it's a digital-only option first and foremost, with a very weird design. Looking at this thing, I hope it's not actually a cylinder when it finalizes, because that will make this thing more difficult to store in an entertainment center. I mean, think about that. Laying it horizontal might be kind of an issue here unless they have something like the PlayStation 5 does with that little, platform underneath, but yeah, I'm not sold on the cylinder design. I think the thing that kind of makes me most curious about this leak, though, is that they're still looking at a $500 price tag. If this really is only about offering a digital-only option, you would think that they'd target a lower price tag similar to what PlayStation does with the PlayStation 5. I'd almost say that keeping it at 1 terabyte and offering a cheaper price might be a better option, unless they're trying to maybe phase out the current models. Now we'll see about all that, but for the time being, this is just an internal leak. Nothing is necessarily finalized, and for that matter, Xbox can kind of use these leaks here and the community's reaction to maybe edit their plans a little bit. Use those leaks to your advantage. But I guess we'll kind of see what happens as we learn more. Right now, though, it sounds like the plan is to release this new console sometime in 2024. Sounds like maybe around the holiday period. One of the more interesting parts about this leak, though, is actually the new immersive controller. This is something that I am very much on board for. This entire generation, there's been a lot of discussion about the Xbox controller compared to the competition. Now, the Xbox controller itself is wonderfully designed. No doubt about that. It's an extremely comfortable and well-designed controller to hold in your hands, but it could still use some other features that we see from Nintendo and PlayStation, and it looks like that's now finally going to happen. According to this leaked document, the new Xbox controller will have precision haptic feedback, VCA haptics double as speakers. It will have an accelerometer or otherwise gyro, which is honestly huge. Then it will have quieter buttons, modular thumbsticks, which is highly interesting, and it'll also have Bluetooth 5.2, and you can wake up the controller by simply lifting it up. I mean, this sounds like the Xbox controller upgrade that we've been waiting for. The PlayStation 5 controller this generation has been, I'd say, a great advancement for controllers with things such as haptic feedback in its triggers. And while I haven't really seen a lot of games take full advantage of this outside of maybe Astro's Playroom and a few other games, it does feel great when it's properly utilized, and it sounds like Xbox will now have something similar in the future. Pair its haptics feedback with a good first-person shooter or a racing game like Forza, and it just, kind of gives you an added layer of immersion. More so, and I know this is going to make a lot of people happy, is that gyro support. This, in my opinion, is a must-have when playing first-person shooters. Now, not everybody has tried this, but you kind of understand what I'm talking about if you have. Controllers and analog sticks might not ever be as accurate as a mouse, but with gyro support, they are a little bit closer. I mean, honestly, I have a hard time playing games like Doom Eternal, as an example, on Xbox. I actually prefer playing those games on the Steam Deck because gyro, it makes the gameplay feel better. It just makes aiming feel a little bit more intuitive once you start to get used to it. So this is actually a very big deal, and I'd say it's definitely exciting stuff. If all of this does come to fruition, which if there's any leak today that I think will, this is the one. I absolutely will buy a new controller day one. Now, the last big leak here, though, is in regards to the next generation Xbox. As some of you may know, console manufacturers are always planning for next generation hardware, and this starts the day that they release their new console. So it's not necessarily a surprise that Xbox is already planning their next generation console, but we do now have an early concept and an expected release window, which are my big takeaways from this leak. In fact, and I think that this is important to understand here, but I would not look too far into the specifics of this leak because it's so far out. This is only a concept for the time being, and plans can and absolutely will change as the years go by. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go forward. But so far, they are expecting next generation consoles to release in 2028, and the next Xbox is being planned as a hybrid compute console. They described it by saying, "Our vision is to develop a next generation hybrid game platform capable of leveraging the combined power of the client and cloud to deliver a deeper immersion and entirely new classes of game experiences." They also mentioned some of the key investments, which includes its CPU, another AMD graphics card, next generation ray tracing, dynamic global illumination, and even thinning the OS. So we do have an early concept here, which I think the cloud compute part is probably going to be what catches most people's attention. That would mean a greater focus on online connectivity, which that always kind of seems to worry some people, but in return, you might get more power. Think about how Flight Simulator works as an example. It's deeply ingrained with cloud support, and it delivers stunning visuals in part for that reason. So it does sound like they want to explore that type of technology more for their next console, which could theoretically take visuals to the next level. But again, this is still 5 years away. So it's hard to tell how much things will change by that time. I personally would not look into this leak too much other than it being an early concept. Either way, though, I mean, this really is a massive leak. This is the biggest leak in Xbox history. And here's the kicker. Apparently, Microsoft was actually the ones that leaked this out themselves, not the FTC, as was originally suspected. Yeah, not exactly ideal. You don't want this type of information to leak out online. But like I said earlier, maybe Microsoft can kind of use some of this to their advantage. See how the community's reacting to some of these leaks and then edit them as they go along. Like I keep saying, these leaks are not finalized and plans do change over time. But let me know what you all think about all this, though. Out of all of the leaks today, let me know what has you most excited. And if you're concerned about something, let me know what has you the most concerned. That's pretty much it for this video, though. And I know today was a little bit different, but just considering how big this leak was, I figured this would be kind of the best way to talk about it. And yeah, we'll get back into our regular schedule tomorrow. Until then, though, per usual, if you enjoyed the video, do make sure to hit that like and subscribe. And also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.